has historically been viewed as the A show, as it was WWE's first really big weekly primetime offering, and let's be honest, the company as we know it wouldn't be the same today if it wasn't for its success. Debuting on January the 11th, 1993, the show has been on the air for almost 1,500 episodes and has seen stars from the New Generation, Attitude, Ruthless Aggression, PG, and modern eras grace its ring. Typically the show where most of the major televised events would happen, Raw has at times been must-see TV and at others an utter chore to sit through, but while the stars, announcers, set, theme, song, authority figures, and format may have changed over time, one thing that Raw has consistently done well is finishing the show with a bang. Whether that was a huge angle, cliffhanger, or, as you're about to discover, a banging match, Team Red has been successful in leaving people wanting to tune in for more each week. Having racked our brains trying to condense almost 30 years of show-closing bouts, we have come up with 10 that we consider the most epic in the history of the show. Given that there's many amazing encounters that we've had to leave off by necessity, I'm already looking forward to reading your constructive feedback in the comments. I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic.com, and these are the 10 most epic Raw main events. Join us! Number 10, TLC 4. A year and a half after SmackDown hosted the third TLC match, Eric Bischoff's Monday Night Raw gave fans the fourth installment as the main event of the October 7th, 2002 Raw, known that night as Raw Roulette. Every match that night in the City of Second Chances had a stipulation thanks to a giant gimmick wheel that determined who was wrestling in what, with audiences being treated to a cage match, street fight, and a, Las Vegas Showgirl contest. Saving the best for last, TLC 4 provided all of the thrills, spills, and near misses of the earlier classics. This one had an altogether different feel to it, since only Christian, Bubba Ray Dudley, and Jeff Hardy remained from the original lineups. Joining the fray were Chris Jericho, Spike Dudley, Rob Van Dam, and Kane, each man unafraid to saddle up and take their licks for our perverse entertainment. In the end, it was the Big Red Machine flying solo after part of the Hurricane was taken out before the match who stood tallest. I mean, he is almost 7 feet tall, so he actually was the tallest man in the match. In fact, I don't even really know what he needed a ladder for, now that I think about it. You've got some explaining to do, Mr. Mayor. Number 9, Triple H versus Shawn Michaels. The last Raw of 2003 took place in San Antonio, Texas, birthplace of everybody's favourite sexy boy. He's certainly mine. Being in the backyard of Shawn Michaels, it made sense to feature him in the show, and during the course of the broadcast, WWE hyped up his World Heavyweight title showdown with Triple H by way of showing clips of vintage HBK. Going a full half hour, the match was as good as any straight wrestling match that the show has ever produced, and think of the ground that covers. Shawn dominated the early going until Triple H backdropped him over the turnbuckle and into outer space in order to take over and begin picking his foe apart. Michaels made intermittent comebacks and even locked on a figure 4 leg lock as Ric Flair went mental at ringside. The match chugged along as the crowd heat increased with every near fall Michaels managed to muster, and the roof practically blew off the arena when he kicked out after a belt shot. Everything suggested that this was his night, and with the referee down, Raw GM Eric Bischoff got involved and countered what appeared to be the winning pin after Sweet Chin music. Only it wasn't, because Shawn's shoulders were also down, meaning the match ended in a double pin and the game retained. The absolute bastard. Number 8, CM Punk versus John Cena. One of the best feuds of recent times, John Cena vs CM Punk is a match that always delivers, whether they're squaring off on a house show, pay-per-view, or in the main event of Raw. Their clash on the February 25th, 2013 edition of the show had added importance, as though it may not have been for a title, a shot against WWE Champion The Rock in the main event of WrestleMania was on the line. Given plenty of time and leeway, Cena and Punk wove together another epic for the ages. The story was, going into the match, that Cena had been in a funk since losing to The Rock at WrestleMania the year before, and wary that the straight-edge superstar had gotten the better of him in their previous meetings, there was a real sense that Punk could score the upset and punch his ticket to the showcase of the Immortals. Both men varied up their movesets and played off of prior meetings, countering moves and then countering their counters, with Punk going so far as to resort to the outlawed piledriver, which shocked even Michael Cole on commentary and probably caused Vince McMahon to headbutt a wall, but it didn't quite get the job done. Cena shook it off and won with an attitude adjustment, set up by the world's worst Hurricane Rana, perhaps the only real flaw in an otherwise flawless contest. Number 7, Owen Hart and the British Bulldog versus Shawn Michaels and Steve Austin. Not everything WWE touched turned to gold in 1997, but the May 26th episode from that year gave us a standout tag match that is today fondly remembered as WWE was on the cusp of going full on with their new attitude. Capping off a show-long storyline, WWE Tag Team Champions Owen Hart and the British Bulldog squared off with the red-hot Steve Austin and Shawn Michaels, who had finally managed to find his smile and was wrestling in his first match in several months. With the frankly ridiculous amount of talent in this match, it would be a struggle to be a stinker, but everyone was on their game, played their role perfectly, and the action flowed beautifully as the crowd got more and more into it. Owen and Davey Boy spent much of the match working over Michaels, including a nice spot that called back to the Owen Inzaguri angle from a couple of years prior, before Shawn was able to make a tag so hot that no amount of Factor 50 could save you, the Texas Rattlesnake coming in to clean house. The unlikely duo then scored the win but had no time to celebrate as a mass brawl with the rest of the Hart Foundation was triggered. A blistering end to a gripping contest and a hint that WWE was not far off turning things around in the Monday Night Wars. Number 6, Charlotte Flair vs Sasha Banks. Sasha Banks and Charlotte Flair weren't the first women to main event an episode of Monday Night Raw. That distinction belongs to Lita and Trish Stratus, who did it almost 14 years prior to the Boss and the Nature Girl throwing down on the November 28, 2016 episode. They may not have been the first, but Charlotte and Sasha certainly took full advantage of the rare opportunity to headline, with the Women's Championship on the line in a Falls Count Anywhere match that took place in Charlotte's hometown of, Charlotte. These two have always had great chemistry together, and with the spotlight shining on them, they delivered in spades, wrestling with great fire and intensity and throwing in some very inventive spots that incorporated their favourite moves as well as some brutal shots with kendo sticks. Charlotte hit a massive moonsault off the announce desk that was set up on a small stage, while Banks hit a diving double knee drop from the barricade. True to the stipulation, the action spilled throughout the arena, which is where the match ended as Sasha was able to trap Charlotte in a Banks statement through the guardrail to become champion for the third time. In a nice touch, Charlotte's old man Rick came out afterwards to raise the hand of and endorse the Boss while his daughter lay writhing in pain in the stands. Attaboy, Nate. Number 5, The Radicals and DX versus The Rock, Cactus Jack, Too Cool, and Rikishi. The Rock and Mick Foley, this time masquerading as Cactus Jack, teaming up with Too Cool and Rikishi against DX, X-Pac and Triple H, and the Radicals, Benoit, Malenko and Saturn. This one was again set up with a great show-long storyline as the Radicals turned on Foley in the opening segment after they were given contracts by Triple H. After the beatdown, a match was made with Mrs. Foley's baby boy needing to recruit 4 partners to go up against the Game and his goons. He managed to wrangle his former Rock and Sock Connection comrade, and Too Cool and Rikishi joined the mix for a barnstorming 10-man tag that was expertly worked and had a positively molten crowd on hand to enhance the already exciting action. It may have only lasted 10 minutes, but they packed a lot into that time and everyone got their opportunity to shine. It also helped further feuds and set up future matches between Cactus and Triple H and the Radicals and Too Cool and Rikishi. The Radicals got the deciding pin, much needed after going 3-0 against DX the week before on SmackDown, but a mass brawl and the surprise return of Kane made for one of the greatest endings ever after an all-timer of a main event. Number 4, the 2-man power trip versus Chris Benoit and Chris Jericho. In the aftermath of WrestleMania 17, a newly healed Stone Cold Steve Austin aligned himself with recent rival Triple H, forming a destructive force that ran roughshod over the WWE roster, at one point holding the WWE Intercontinental and World Tag Team titles. The terrible twosome would have likely continued to wreak havoc for the foreseeable future had the Game not went down with an injury sustained in their tag title defense against Chris Jericho and Chris Benoit in the main event of the May 21st, 2001 Raw. A hard-hitting and fast-paced example of old-school tag team wrestling par excellence, the match saw the Bionic Redneck and the King of Kings use brute force and illegal tactics to gain an advantage over their smaller opponents, only to be undone by the technical wizardry and sheer determination of Y2J and the Rabid Wolverine. It was during the melee at the end that Papa H tore his quad completely off the bone, a sentence that makes my knobbly knees hurt just saying it. Nevertheless, he toughed it out and finished the match, including taking a waltz of Jericho on the announce table, which must have felt about as good as standing in your average bear trap. The Canadian kids were able to pull off the upset, winning thanks to a miscommunication, but nobody really lost coming out of this one. Well, I suppose Triple H may have lost 8 months of his career and some of his leg, but still, good match. Number 3, Mankind vs. The Rock. Unlike many of the matches on this countdown, The Rock vs. Mankind for the WWE title from the January 4th, 1999 Raw was not exactly a great one, despite the great one being in it, at least from a technical standpoint. It wasn't a bad match by any means, but it was a shade under 10 minutes long and featured more brawling and shenanigans, like Rock putting on a headset and calling his own match, than actual wrestling. For pure emotional investment, however, few matches in the show's illustrious history measure up to this one. The story going in was that the former champion Mankind, who had been screwed out of the title at the 1998 Survivor Series in Bret Hart-like fashion, wanted a rematch and threatened to break Shane McMahon's arm if he didn't receive it. The match was made with a no disqualification stipulation, with the McMahons and members of the Corporation and DX stationed at ringside. A mass brawl inevitably erupted, allowing Stone Cold to interfere and deck the People's Champion with a chair shot, giving Mankind the win and causing a crowd reaction so seismic that they're going to have to invent a new scale in which to measure it. In some circles, it's known as the Pacitti Pop. An incredible main event and a true Cinderella moment. If Cinderella wore a leather mask, lived in a boiler room, and liked to roll around in thumbtacks, that is. Number 2, Jeff Hardy vs. The Undertaker. Jeff Hardy vs. The Undertaker in 2002 was a mini feud that kicked off the way most good ones do, with one man kicking another into a pile of Tommy Dreamer's vomit. Auspicious beginnings, yes, but the final product of this divergence, Taker was gearing up for a major feud with The Rock at the time, but the Great One was having a well-deserved break after promoting the Scorpion King, was a match that literally catapulted Jeff Hardy into, and figuratively, up the WWE ladder. In his biggest match without his older brother by his side, the charismatic Enigma had the upper hand in this speciality match, but Big Evil was the reigning undisputed champion, and after an early flurry by Jeff, he began to pick him apart in trademark style. A lot more deliberate than just about any of Jeff's other stunt show extravaganzas, this was no less engrossing, and the fans were with the underdog every step of the way, as he wouldn't stay down and came within millimeters of leaving as the new champ. Jim Ross doing an incredible job of selling the potential miracle on commentary. On this night, it wasn't to be though. A chokeslam off the top of a ladder, his downfall. Again, literally, because down he fell, off the top of a freaking ladder. But he did gain something that night besides an aching body, and that was the respect of a locker room leader. Me. Number 1, John Cena vs. Shawn Michaels. Here it is, the most epic main event in Raw history, and what a fitting word that is, because John Cena vs. Shawn Michaels, headliner of the April 23rd, 2007 edition of the show, was one of the longest in the show's history, certainly before WWE decided to torture us every week with an additional hour of needless content. The show took place in Earl's Court, London, but that night the venue belonged to Big Match John and the Heartbreak Kid, not some candy-ass mark called Earl. In a rematch from their WrestleMania 23 main event, Michaels and Cena went at it with great vigor for close to an hour. It wasn't an Iron Man match, and nothing in the build-up suggested that the fans were about to witness a marathon effort. That is what they call a pleasant surprise. The early stages consisted primarily of good mat wrestling. Yes, Cena could actually do that, despite what Cena Sucks 69 would have you believe, before the two traded the advantage, pulling out moves and sequences that neither man has done before or since. It was a fantastic achievement, and the UK crowd definitely helped things, as the drama really ramped up with the false finishes before Michaels wrapped things up with a sweet chin music. Redemption for Michaels, a great advert for Cena's abilities, and catnip for fans of this mental thing that we all love.